Good afternoon. It is Wednesday. This is the Ways and Means Committee. It's February 18th, 1:15. We are continuing our work on our regional assessment district language. Herbie Keaton is here, but has not made substantive changes since last week. Is that true? Something substantive? Okay, a few adjustments to the language. We can look at the language as a refresher for folks right now before we hear from our witnesses. Or we can not do that. Do people have a preference? Have people caught themselves up and remember what the language is? It's a quick walkthrough helpful? Yep, okay.
Yeah.
Kirby,
Yeah.
yeah.
Draft 2.5.
I don't know, Kirby will tell you.
Yes, Kirby King Legislative Council, I believe what was distributed at the end of last week was draft 2.3. This 2.5, I have highlighted any changes from 2.3. I thought as a way to give you a quick refresher, maybe we'll go through the most recent adjustments. The proposed language starts with the establishment of the regional assessment districts with the legislative intent language, which has not changed. The establishment and the process for the Department of Taxes to establish boundaries for the new regional assessment districts has not changed in this version. But one thing that did change after discussion with the committee last time is previously the municipalities within the regional assessment districts, it was written so that they could jointly do a mass appraisal together, but this is changing it so that they're required to work together because I think
That's
this,
the point of the whole thing.
that's what I was going to say. I think that was the discussion. But to leave for different cases to leave, I don't know, emergency valve or however you want to put it. There's language here that allows the director to waive the requirement to jointly appraise under this subsection if a municipality shows and the director finds that I have highlighted the word extraordinary as a policy question for you, whether you want it to be that strict or whether it should just say that circumstances would cause a joint appraisal to be too administratively burdensome. I've also highlighted whether you want both of these things to be met or just one of them, or cost ineffective. So it could read, the director finds that circumstances would cause a joint appraisal to be too administratively burdensome or cost ineffective. That would give the most amount of leeway.
Thanks.
And then also a provision that the director's decision whether to grant a waiver shall be final to make it clear that this is not appealable. The standard guidelines and procedures to administer this is the same. And then the appeal sections have some updates based on partly on requests from the department. So we have a new provision. Everyone seems to be coming in on cue. This relates to Representative Kimball and his concern that this could be taken to somehow circumvent or interfere with the grievance process. So there's new provision saying this section, this is the appeals section for the RAD appeals board. This section shall not be construed to prevent or alter the process for taxpayers to bring and resolve grievances to a municipal assessing official under the grievance section. And we also have a provision saying, notwithstanding subsection A, which is the section in which people can appeal to the RAD appeals board, appeals evaluations conducted by the Division of Property Valuation Review pursuant to 3 different sections of law where PVR is responsible for doing the initial valuation for utility property, electric transmission, and telecommunications, shall be made directly to the commissioner or superior court. So those evaluations would not go to the RAD appeals board. This is a concern raised by the department. This language also adds that the taxpayer would have the choice of appealing to the commissioner or superior court. Some previous versions of this changed it from current law so that appeals would go to the commissioner and then the commissioner could choose to send them on to superior court. But this adds back that requirement that, or the requirements option for a taxpayer to appeal to court instead of the commissioner. And so a lot of this highlighted language is just to conform to that. To allowing that to happen. There's also a tweak from department feedback relating to objections. When a party claims that there was something faulty with the process involved with an appeal. And it allows those objections to, it allows 30 days to send notice of those objections. It used to be 14 days. All the stuff that I'm going past is just conforming changes relating to the option to go to court. We have a change where we've added, we've taken the section of law that exists now that's in the appeals chapter that's the BAC appeals chapter that's going to be repealed and replaced by the RAD appeals board. And so we've taken this one section on PBR valuations for public utilities and moved it to its own section so it does not get repealed with the rest of that chapter. And I have added the repeal of the chapter here. One question to remind you that's still an open question is last time we looked at separating out the per parcel fee for grand list maintenance and for reappraisals. Those things are separated out now in the language that you see, but that $8.50 per parcel fee that is currently used for both of those things under this language would only be used for grand list maintenance, and we've not set.
I've asked the department to make a recommendation on what that number would be, because frankly, if we changed it, it would, well, it feels arbitrary for me if I picked a number. And so we're waiting on that recommendation. But if anyone has a number they want to put in there, please feel free to say so.
635.
Thanks, Charlie.
529.
Okay. I don't want us to get a reputation for being arbitrary and capricious around here.
Wasn't serious.
I know. Crying.
There's also some language here adding we talked about it last time, but the language wasn't in yet on the tax department positions. There's no appropriation because this is for fiscal year 29 and we're not there yet. So my understanding is any appropriation necessary for these two positions would take place in the department's budget during that fiscal year. And then we have a lot of conforming changes relating to repealing chapter 131 and all the references. So I've gone through many different places and replaced the reference to chapter 131 or one of the sections that are being repealed with what would be the appropriate reference after changing the law. I'll get a lot of that. Which brings us to the effective dates. The new effective dates here are obviously, since we don't have section numbers, isn't as helpful as it could be. But there's new effective date lines added for the repeal of chapter 131 and the conforming changes. which would need to take place July 1, 2029. Because the regional assessment district appeals boards are set to basically come online July 1, 2029. So that would be, even though January 1, 2029 is when the RADs themselves would commence, 6 months later for the appeals boards to start their thing. So we'll be keeping current law until July 1, 2029.
One picky thing up on the first page. Believe there should be,
But it's not gonna help me, is it?
in the blue writing, the first page. There should be, I believe. On line 20. In the word directors, there should be an apostrophe.
Oh.
Ooh, big deal, but
Thanks,
anyway.
Jim. Well done.
One of the things I was trained up on, way back. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirby. Really appreciate it. Well, I have you down as not being here yet. Would you like to go first or later, or do you have a? Yes, that's fine. I just, yeah. Representative Woody.
Yeah, now that we're looking at that, does it say earlier the director, his or her designee, or their designee, sorry.
Does not say designate.
Well, so I have designee or-
It's pretty standard throughout the PBR sections to just say the director. It's understood that that's not going to always be that person exactly.
Okay, that's fine with me then.
It also would also refer to the director themselves if they have.
Thank you.
Robert Vickery?
Yeah.
Would you like to join us? Thanks. Thank you.
So,
Are you bringing a second person with you? You're welcome to. Desk space gets a little more awkward, but they're both used to it, so.
agree.
I'm Amy Burstein.
So we represent Bala. So just a quick thing, we're a little bit behind on the versions. We just got the 2.3 version yesterday.
Mhm.
So I'm sure.
Yesterday?
Yes, yesterday afternoon, I did. So we did kind of do some crunching.
And I'll just offer, we haven't made substantive changes particularly
Yeah.
since what we got sent out on
Okay.
Friday, so.
Right, that's fine. So I wanted to talk just about the language that we have so far, and then a couple other items that Vala has talked about in our meetings and things that we just want to throw out on the board, see what sticks. So the first thing would be in 3416. The commissioner shall prioritize regional assessment districts, including a minimum of 10,000 parcels. That's quite a large number of parcels, and I'm not quite sure what the term prioritize would mean. Is that saying that the regional assessment districts would be 10,000 parcels? Or they're just gonna prioritize making them 10,000? So we weren't sure what we meant by the word term prioritize. Because this would be a new sort of idea on how to reappraise properties in Vermont. We believe 10,000 would be a very large number, considering the volume of appeals that would result in 10,000 parcels being reassessed at once, as well as the amount of work that would be done by the reappraisal companies for the municipalities to do 10,000 parcels at once. We recommend dropping that number to about 1,000. And I know that's quite a small number, but if you look at the number of properties in the state that are under 1,000 parcels, number of municipalities, there's about 148 municipalities that are under 1,000 parcels. So those would be the parcels that we would say these ones should be brought into RADs. It also takes care of the issue of the smaller municipalities that don't have staffing to contract reappraisals. because they would be joining with other municipalities. So our recommendation is dropping that 10,000 number to about 1,000.
Wow.
Okay, and I think, the average, I think I put this on here. The average town size is about 1,400 parsons. So we would be just below the average size of a town, or that would be as a minimum. Now, when we first talked about this, I thought this should be a minimum and a maximum. But that's future talking, so I know it's a small number, but for the first steps in this process, we think that's the best way to go and look at it as baby steps. The second thing we want to do is we want to make sure that there was language that would define how a RAD would be, how municipalities would be joining. So we wanted to look at what we had this, if you have a school district, you have a municipality that has 500 parcels on one side of the school district, and another one that's 500 parcels on the other side of the school district, not joining those two because of the difference in distance, but only looking at contiguous towns, and towns with geographic similarities and also market similarities. So you are having a town like, yes, like Beecham and Groton, or Marshfield and Groton, where you have to drive over a mountain to get to. That would kind of defeat the purpose of having a regional area if you're driving long distances to get to another town that's in the same reappraisal cycle. So I think what we wanted to look at was limiting it to towns that are contiguous and have similar market conditions. The next one we want to look at is we want to make sure.
Sorry to interrupt. I think it would be helpful if you explained why for each of your recommendations.
Sure. So we'll take Randolph, for instance, or Northfield. So Northfield and Randolph, right now they're in two separate school districts, but if they were to be joined into one, you've got Brookfield, you've got Braintree, and Roxbury. All would be all in one district as well as Northfield and Randolph. So Roxbury is on the Montpelier side of Northfield, Braintree is on the other side. So it wouldn't make sense to have Roxbury and Braintree in the same RAD, because you'd have to drive through Northfield to get to them. Right? It'd make more sense to have Braintree and Randolph in one RAD district, and Roxbury and Northfield in another RAD district. Does that see what I'm saying?
And like, kind of.
So they're contiguous,
Okay.
and they're connected. So you're not having to drive through other municipalities to get to a municipality to do the reappraisal work. Okay. It also makes sense as far as appeals. The RAD appeal board wouldn't have to be driving all over the county. The other thing is, when you look at market regions, they tend not to be spot here and there, but we want to have those all in one area. So Randolph is a different market area than, say, Brookfield and Braintree. They have a different market. That's what we would be looking at, or asking that be included as you create the markets, or create the RAD districts, that you would consider contiguous towns as well as market regions.
And how would you define market in this context?
So
Sorry, I'm not trying to,
Oh, no,
I just want to understand your
it's a good question.
thinking behind your recommendation.
Like, if you were to take Montpelier, because we're here, Plainfield and Marshfield, there are two different, there's a different market. Marshfield, North Montpelier, and Plainfield, they're similar as far as the market, as far as the land values, they're all very similar. Montpelier is it's a different market. You know, but you go out to East Montpelier, those market values start dropping, those land values start dropping, When you get to Plainfield, Marshfield, they're very similar. With a person buying a property in Plainfield, Marshfield, you're gonna pay the same amount, but if you go to Montpelier, it's gonna be different value.
And what's the value of having the same market? That if having one rad have entirely the same market conditions?
Well, if you were to do a equalization study, you wouldn't have one area that would be increasing the market.
Thank you.
Stay away.
Okay, thank you. Representative Burkhardt.
Are there different listers and assessors, like contracting firms that focus on different types of markets? Or do the same folks that, you know, a regional assessment district would contract with, do they look at all different types of markets and properties?
So right now, the contractor would go into a municipality and look at the entire municipality. They would adjust within the municipality, different neighborhoods, in the municipality or different categories of properties. So I'll pick on my town, for instance. We have multiple different neighborhoods in my town of Colchester, where we have Borders Point, which is one market area. We have, up north on Route 2, near Milton is another market area. Then we have a commercial district, which is another market area. But it's all within one town, and we justify neighborhoods.
And so the same lister and assessor would do the whole town, presumably?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, thank you.
So the other point, the next part, we want to make sure that in 3216C, that the word may stay there. We want to make sure that municipalities aren't forced into regional assessment districts, that they have the option to do their own reappraisals. There's many reasons for that. Municipality may choose, they have unique properties. They want to make sure that they have that ability to appraise those unique properties. We want to make sure the towns have the right to hire a third-party firm to review your appraisals. This is pretty common. Sometimes, like for instance, Burlington, when they did their last reassessment, they had a third party review their assessments. And then we also want to make sure that municipalities can hire specific specialized appraisers to do specialized properties within that town. For instance, Colchester has multiple marinas. We hire a separate appraiser to do those marinas. We've hired separate marinas.
I thought you said greenhouse at first.
Oh, sorry.
What is
Yeah.
greenhouses in Colchester? Okay, sorry, continue. Okay, great, okay.
Marinas,
Okay.
so we have multiple marinas in Colchester, and we've hired out specialized appraisers to do that assessments. Same thing with our Class A office buildings, we've hired separate appraisal firms to do just the Class A office buildings. So we want to make sure that municipalities have that right to do that. And not only during the reappraisal year, but also in between reappraisal years.
In Colchester, are you doing everything in-house from your assessors and appraisers? Or do you hire out to an outside firm?
We've hired out to a firm. We don't have the manpower to do all the assessments, to do all the inspections, and then to do the review all in 1 year.
Yeah.
We have staff, 2 people, and we can do about, we average about 400 inspections a year in my office. But in order to do that, we're looking at actually the 6-year appraisals. The person we hired, they are going to be our data collector. They will be doing 1/5 of the town inspections over the next 5 years. On the 6th year in 2032, we will do our updates. So that'll be in-house, but when we do it all in 1 year, we have to hire it. So we're gonna go to 3216.
I just have a question on your last statement in regards to what your town does. 1/5 of the town, for 5 years, and then it's a 6-year. How does that work in the sense of a town that you looked at 5 years previous, I mean, not the town, but the property. There must be, whether it's a building permit or something, where you have to go back and make sure that it's still the same, correct?
Yeah, we will still go and review all the building permits every year.
Okay.
So that wouldn't change. But it would be, in order to do inspections, entire town, we would do 1/5 of the town a year. For the reappraisal and update any records, or actually, we have, very good records. So it's more of just verifying the data in our town.
Okay, thanks.
And we're lucky, we have plenty of zoning, so. Not all things have that. So we want to preserve the right for municipality to appeal to the commissioner. If they get put into a RAD, if they would choose to be in a join a RAD of another municipality, as long as it's within the same school district. We want to make sure municipalities can say to the commissioner, we don't agree with this placement that we're in, we wanna either do it on our own or join a different RAD district. And so we would like to strike the language here in 3416C that says the municipalities shall not have the right to appeal to the commissioner. We want to make sure we have the right to appeal to the commissioner for placement in RAD. And then going forward, 3418. This is a little bit more about funding and funding for RAD and funding for the RAD board. The current statute says that the municipalities will pay for the RAD. For the RAD board. So we want to make sure that we rewrite that language so that it's funded by the state, or through the state. This is kind of a complex reason. But when you have multiple municipalities coming together and each one municipality has to kind of pop up in that fund. Individually, there's no structure in place to say what a municipality is going to add to that fund. We don't know who's going to hold the fund, which municipality is going to hold the fund, if the state's going to hold the fund for the staffing of a RAD board. There's more than just the cost of the board. There's the cost of mailing. There's the cost of scheduling for the RAD board. So there's added cost to just the hearings. We believe that this is better suited if the state pays for that, or if the state takes over that payment as opposed to municipalities. So, of course, having municipalities have to come together and determine what they're going to each pay seems cumbersome at the best. And if we have the state take over that payment, that would make more sense. And the next piece here would be the number of parcels we're looking at or the number of members on the board. Right now, it's 1,000 parcels, and then you round it up to the next 1,000 and round it up to the next 1,000 as it's written now. We'd like to take that down to 500 parcels per member of the board. The reasoning for that is that when you have more members on the board, you have more options for board members to not hear all the hearings. If you have, I'm just going to say it, about 10,000 parcels in a RAD, and typically when we contract, we estimate 10% will go to the first level appeal, and 10% of those will go to the second level appeal. So that would be 100 appeals to a RAD board with 10,000 parcels. So in order to just have 5 people listen to all 100 of those, the more members you have on the board, you can rotate the members in those hearings. There's less burden on the members to take all the time away from their jobs, their families. I'm not sure if these are going to be volunteered or if they're going to be paid. We don't know that yet. which brings me to another point, BCA members, and I heard this on last week, BCA members are paid. So not all municipalities do that, but, you know,
Most, do you have a sense of how many municipalities do
I
that?
don't. I can tell you that Colchester, we give them a choice to be voluntary or paid. And that's their current town clerk does that. Prior town clerk paid them, made sure that they were paid. So what's interesting is they all mark off volunteer. So they don't actually get paid, but they have the option to get paid in Colchester. So I don't know.
In Randolph, it's the same thing.
Yep.
The pay is so low, it doesn't matter, so they might as well not. pay.
Yeah, it's minimum wage.
Oh, and there's 48 towns that have fewer than 500 parcels too. So it gives them equal representation on the board when you get to 500.
I think we were concerned about the board being too wieldy. Being too large.
Too large.
But in a concept of, 10,000 parcels, you're gonna have some communities that have maybe 5 members.
Yep.
Theoretically,
It's possible, yeah.
so the question of, is that fair? Anyway, I think you want to have a board of 50 members.
Well, Colchester, our BC has 20 members. And what we do and what we're gonna be doing this reappraisal is we're actually gonna have them on rotation. So that,
That's what we were mentioning.
last reappraisal, we had all the, just sent the invite to all the boards and said, here's your yearly hearings. And we usually had about 8 or 9 people show up per hearing. We've had as little as 5 show up, but this year what we're doing is we're saying, we're gonna do, this is your hearing date, this is and break it up to groups of 5. That way, everyone's hearing them all and that everybody participates versus last reappraisal, we had the same 9 people or 8 people show up every time. And they got pretty tired at the end. So I think the idea of having large board might work out better as far as people showing up and spreading out that burden. So then we're gonna skip down. So this is on 3419. And I'm not sure, Kirby mentioned this today as well. I don't know if this is the current version, but it appeared that that a person could skip the RAD board appeal and go directly to the commissioner or superior court, according to the language that I have of 2.3. Because it specifically says the district regional assessment, district appeal board, or appeal to the director or commissioner or superior court. I would say that you should have people everybody go through the same process, except for utilities. I agree with you on utilities, but we don't want to have people skipping a level of board and not everybody doing that. So I have members in our community that would go straight to superior court and that they just see the BC as a stepping stone. But they have to go through that process. And it's only fair that everybody use that same process. So.
Yeah, sure.
So sorry to interrupt, Kirby Key, City Council. So yeah, to clarify, in the latest draft and just looking at before, there was a miscommunication with the Department of Taxes and what the request was. Their request was to make sure that the PDR evaluations are able to skip the board.
Yeah.
So the new language does what you're asking.
Oh, okay.
It does not give the taxpayer the option to skip the red board and let the PDR.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Thank you.
I just realized that what you're reading from, we don't have in front of us. I'm taking notes, but they might not be as good as your notes. So are you able to submit? Is it there?
There's 6 pages.
Sorry, not refreshing well. Back to you.
Yeah, and we were up pretty late last night, so if there's any,
So we sent the language to Vala on Friday. Is there someone better we should be, like, is there another way we should be sending it to you so you get information in a timely way from us?
We got language Friday, but we also got
Okay,
the language for 2.3.
okay, great, okay,
On Sunday.
Sunday.
Boston Monday.
Oh, okay.
okay, great,
So
okay.
you know.
Okay, I just want to make
I
sure.
was
we're-
No.
Yeah,
So I received it yesterday. But yeah, Mimi and I worked a little late yesterday to try to get this. So if there's any spelling errors and there's any,
no, it's all good. It's more the gist.
okay. So the other thing we want to look at, and this is kind of something that we talk about in Vala quite a bit, is not allowing property owners to go to Superior Court at all. We don't believe Superior Court is the most efficient way to do an appeal. We would prefer to have appeals done through the commissioner and a board of appeal on the state level. And the reason for this, and if you've ever been appealed to the Superior Court in a property appeal, it takes about 2 years to get a hearing. You could be 2.5 years out before you get a decision. That decision comes through and it's in favor of the property owner and reduces the assessment. The town's on the hook for paying those property taxes, overpaid taxes back, plus interest. Whereas a board or state board may be more efficient. Right now, we go to the property valuation review. Property valuation review sends our hearing officer out. We usually have those done within a year, which is still a lag, but it's not as cumbersome as the court. The cost of court, having the property owner hire an attorney and appraiser, it just adds cost to the property owner. It makes it so that property owners that don't have the means can't go to that appeal. If you have a property that's sent to property valuation review, an appeal, and the director says it's too complicated, we want the Superior Court to hear it, that property owner may not have the funds to go to court. So it restricts the number of people who can actually go that route. And if we have it the same route for everybody, without that split, it seems to me to be more affordable for everybody and much more streamlined and not as cumbersome. The other thing is, I don't necessarily think clerks want to hear it. They have enough on their docket. They don't need to hear somebody complain that their basement is not finished and they think they're being assessed on a finished basement. I've been there, like 8 hours in court.
No, I hear you, I hear you.
That's just something we, at ballot think is an appropriate thing to do. And then the appeal board could go to Supreme Court after that. There's other towns, other states, like New Hampshire has an appeal board. They don't, after the appeal board, they can go to Supreme Court. Massachusetts has an appeal board. So we wouldn't be the first ones that do that. So then just moving on down. So I think Kirby, you talked about this, the 50 per parcel, just making sure that that is for grantless maintenance. Is what we want to strike out the cost of reappraisal and reappraisal, but I think you already talked about that. And then the next part was the funding for reappraisals, which our recommendation is having that funding be split up for 6 years and be given to the town in a fund on a 6-year basis, and that fund be only used for reappraisals. The reason for that is the town, there's more cost to just the contracted reappraisal. There's cost for mailing, there's cost for staffing, there's cost for communication with property owners, there's cost, postage, technology. So there's added cost, not just the contract that the municipalities take on. And it'd be good for the municipality to be able to distribute those funds appropriately the way they want to, as long as those funds are done for reappraisal only. And I think the state should have the right to audit that fund as well. Right now, the funds are being sent to the 850 per parcel is being sent to the town. Some towns are putting in their general fund. Some towns are using it for their assessor office or lister office. I think that fund was originally purposed for reappraisals. And like Colchester, we put in a separate fund, we don't touch it. That's what we use for our reappraisal.
So what would you think if the treasurer's office in the state of Vermont just held those funds? And then you just said, we need them for this.
I think that's fine. My worry is that the fund would only be going to a contractor as opposed to costs the municipality has for the reappraisal. And to have to request, oh, we have this bill from the printer of $500 because we sent out, 300 notices on and having to go to the state treasurer and ask for that money. It just seems an added step. So if the town has a fund and that fund is restricted for use only reappraisal and reappraisal. And then if it gets put in every year, the town can also collect interest on that as well. And that fund would grow through that as well.
Good answer.
So that's kind of our suggestion. However, that fund amount is, I think, $66 based on 2/3 of $100 per parcel. So divided by 6 and it's put in that fund. And I also think it's important that the state should have the right to audit that fund, that it's being used in that amount of money. If that's what we're gonna do. Just keeping those towns honest.
If we could go back up, we talked briefly about that $8.50 per green list for personal maintenance now. But that's what it is currently for both personal maintenance and the reappraisal. So I didn't hear you say, are you saying you want to keep that $8.50 for just the maintenance?
Yeah, and maybe Jill can talk about this a bit better. So there is an amount of money that goes to the towns for homestead. I think it's $1 per parcel. And then there is some of that money, I believe, was supposed to be for homesteads and current use costs. I don't know what the amount should be at $8.50. But part of that was to take care of current use and homesteads as the cost that the town has. So, if you're separating out the fund, one for grand list maintenance and one for reappraisal, yeah, the $8.50 would stay. I don't know how much you want to make that amount to be, and I couldn't tell you with a suggestion right now.
Do you want to get back to us on a suggestion around if we're separating out the two amounts, how much maintenance?
Sure.
Can I give
That would be
an
helpful.
example of why? For the grand list maintenance, for my town, it has nothing to do with municipal taxes. I spent close to $100 on postage and certificate of mailings just for current use and homestead parcels. So, if that helps.
And then, on top of that too, if we've scratched out that $66 figure for municipalities for the reappraisal. Is there another figure in there that you'd like to see rather than $66?
Well, yeah, so of course we want it to be 100%. Colchester's paying $100 per parcel right now to put our reappraisal. There are other towns that pay more, and I don't know what the average is. I think I've heard $100 to $150 per parcel. But I've heard, I don't know. I don't have that figure on me. I can tell you what Colchester pays is $100 per parcel. That's what we're paying right now. Yes, so, oh, right. So
I guess I would ask, I want to make sure that we're not sort of doing math on the fly and you're just not just
Yeah.
pitching numbers out. So if you could get back to us on recommended
Yeah.
numbers, that would be
Yeah.
helpful. We don't have to spend time on it now.
One thing that was thrown out there was if we could calculate what the average cost is for the prior year, adjusted by the CPI, that would just be a formula to give it every year, so we know how much it is. So if the average cost is whatever number, statewide, that would seem to be like a fair way to do it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna try to ask them to get through there. Thank you. For not making me finish my sentences, Representative Bodie.
So I guess that goes through the language that we had. Right, sorry, Mimi? Okay. So the next thing I just threw in this, which is a breakdown of the time it takes for an appeal to the BCA level and what we're looking at for our RAD. So typically, and just to speak for Colchester, in Colchester, we take about 20 minutes for the hearing and there's about 10 minutes of deliberation. We run, this is basically telling us what it is. It takes about 10 minutes to schedule. That's sending out notice, people calling back, getting the call, scheduling the appeal, 20 minutes of testimony. We have 10 minutes of deliberation. We have 10 minutes of a final report to write up that final report. Typically those reports are boilerplate, so it's just changing things out, but it still takes time for the clerk to do that. Then we have to post it, we have to do the minutes, we have to post the minutes. So we're talking about an hour and a half per appeal, just on average of work and time. And then if you look at 100 appeals, say a RAD is 1,000 parcels, you're getting 100 appeals to the RAD district using 10%. You're talking about 150 hours of work and time that's put into those appeals. And then I just said, if we pay our board members $25 an hour, I don't know. But this is just an estimate on what it cost on a RAD district of 1,000 parcels. And then if you go statewide, an estimation that we had heard that one of our members gave us was about 338,000 parcels in the state. If you take that at 10%, you're at 550 parcels, 544 parcels, and what that cost would be. So that's just explaining to you what amount of time it takes for one appeal. Right, and that's typical for like a Board of Civil Authority appeal. And then the next thing, this is not really part of the RAD, but we want to talk about it. Is currently when a property appeals, that current assessment stays on the grand list and the person pays taxes on that grand list on that assessment. If that appeal goes, say the appeal goes to court and it's 2.5 years later, that assessment's dropped, the town has to pay back that money plus interest. Our proposal, an idea that we've been talking about, is what if they took that tax dollars and put it in an escrow account as opposed to paying to the state and going to the municipal general fund. It gets put in, if a person appeals and what they pay in taxes gets put into an escrow account, at the end of the appeal hearing, then the amount can be distributed to the property owners. That amount of money will be gaining interest. So if it's in the property owner's favor, the value is lowered, that person can get the overpaid taxes plus interest. And we're not burdening the municipalities by having to pay the tax with interest or coming up with money that's already there. So that's just an idea that some members have thought of, and I want to throw it out there.
Yep.
For everybody.
Appreciate it.
So
Yes, sir.
Before we go to Representative Wasak and Representative Maslin, we invited the league to testify on miscellaneous tax, this bill, and property classifications. They're they weren't available today, and so they're coming in tomorrow. But none of them were available today. I'm curious if they provide you any assistance in sort of tracking this legislation, figuring out the League of Cities and Towns.
Right, valid?
Providing Vala with any support through this process, yes, because you all work with municipalities.
Yeah, we don't really talk. I just, I
Well,
don't.
we work together on like conferences and whatnot, but we are,
But not like in terms of, okay, great, thanks. Because do you have any paid staff at all?
No.
Yeah, you're all like doing your jobs and then trying to deal with us. Yeah, that's a lot. Okay, thank you. That's just helpful context.
yeah, Vala does, we have, thanks to this RAD, it has increased our membership. And so we're at.
That's what we're here for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're at 100, almost, I would say between 145, 150 municipalities, which is pretty good, being that like. Not all offices are staffed, so we can't say like, oh, so that's pretty good, and we have like 369 individual members that include contract companies and independent people. Is what we're representing, but we're all volunteers.
Thanks. Representative Wozniak and then Maslin if you still have some.
Just to go back to the very beginning of your presentation, going down from the 10,000 to 1,000 parcels, you also indicate that the average town has around 1,400 parcels. So is that recommendation mostly to make appeals more manageable?
Yes, that's the primary focus of that.
Okay, good. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I was on.
Yeah. And also make the reappraisals more manageable and maintenance more.
Representative Maslin, I'm going to jump in to follow up on that same question, if that's okay. Even if it's not okay, I'm going to do it. The 1,000 parcels, have you thought about our ability to perform statistical analysis on the RAD if you have such a low parcel count?
Yeah, so my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't, is that the equalization study will be school district wide. And you can have multiple RADs within a school district. That's how it's written right now. So if the school district is 10,000 parcels, but you have 4 RADs within that school district, you're not doing the equalization study on the size of the RAD, it's the size of the school district. So it's a larger size.
I think they would all need to be assessed at the same time.
Yes.
Work.
Yeah, so the school district would have to have.
So it'd be like a meta RAD thing, like you would have the RAD and then you'd have the other thing above the RAD.
Right, the school district. And
Okay.
and if everybody in the school district is on the same cycle. The value should be 100% on that cycle on the 6-year. So on the, if it drops down a year after to 95%, it's 95% for the entire school district.
So I think maybe we're defining RAD differently and just inside of our imaginations, though it's defined in one way in the statute. So, or like imagining it differently. So could you imagine having one, because what you described as a school district is how I imagine the RAD. And so could you have one RAD with 4 different appraisal contracts inside it? And would that solve the problems that you're trying to solve by saying 1,000 parcels? Because I feel like you're imagining like a team of 3 people that needs to like drive across town. And I'm imagining like an appraisal firm.
Yeah, so I've worked with appraisal firms.
Yeah.
And being on the only person working in a town of say 1,200 parcels.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying, and I think what I'm imagining is that you've got the school district as the borders of possibly could be the RAD, and then you could have multiple RADs within it. Not necessarily one municipality. You could have one municipality being a RAD, or you could have 2 municipalities being a RAD, or 5 municipalities within a RAD, right? And that RAD has one contract.
Okay,
Okay,
that's how you're imagining it.
that's how I'm seeing it. So the RAD would be the one contract. But if there's a school district that has 5 towns and one municipality has 5,000 parcels, the rest of them all have 500 parcels.
Mhm.
It would make sense to have those. The rest of the school district should be in one RAD, and then municipality with 5,000 parcels be its own RAD.
Thanks. Representative Maslin.
Yeah, some of my questions I think you've answered, some stretch back a little bit, but, I'm combine a couple of things. One, number appraisal on different sides of a mountain range, for example, or hill range or something like that. And also the questions on multiple appraisal firms within a RAD. Comes down to this in, special districts, arena, whatever. Essentially, what you're saying is if they all conform to the same standards when they're doing their appraisal, we shouldn't worry about your farm versus my farm working in the same RAD. As long as the protocol parameters or whatever are the same, they should be reasonably consistent, reasonably fair, is what you're saying.
Yeah. The goal is 100% fair market value. It doesn't
Sure.
matter who does the appraisal. Doesn't matter which company does it.
I had several different questions, but they all basically relate to the same issue and they've been answered, so thank you.
And if I could ask, I asked this question, gave this scenario, you kind of mentioned it a little bit in the towns that you're familiar with, but in regards to the equalization study, I don't see how my town Lower can be compared with J Peak, which can be compared with Westford, Westmore, which is Lake Willoughby, and come up with a RAD-wise county level of appraisal. Because Jay's conceivably gonna be up here with their sales continuing. Lowell may stay constant, right? Same thing with Westmore. So that CLA is gonna be dropping in those particular towns, but Lowell may be not. So that's not fair to my town or other small towns that are. So how do you perceive that? Not only the common level appraisal, but go further and talk about the COD. Because I think the COD would even be harder.
So I think the idea is if you're doing a equalization study on a school district, Lowell and Jay on the same school district. But if you have everyone's assessed at 100% market value on the same year. And you have the next year, you have a boom in condo sales on J, right? And they go up 25%. Whereas the rest of the town, the rest of the area stay the same. You're gonna see that in the equalization study. And it's could possibly bring everybody else's equal CLA down, bring everybody else's taxes up, right?
Correct.
So, we have that right now. I can talk about Colchester, because Colchester has multiple different neighborhoods. Our lakefront property, our ratio on our lakefront property is about 45%. Our ratio on our commercial properties is closer to 65%. Okay, and residential properties are around 50%. So you already have things like that, and because we're shortening the time period between reappraisals from 10 plus years to 6 years, that should not affect that long. It takes a while for properties to see that change. You have one sale in a condo that's 80% in J, that shouldn't affect the rest of the town. If you have multiple ones, it's gonna take several years to get to that point. By that, does that make sense? So we already have that issue in a lot of towns, where we have different markets in the towns adjusting. You could, in theory, have a CLA per town. But the idea of going to a school district for your CLA is to expand that number of sales, so that 1 or 2 sales in J isn't gonna affect everybody else as much.
I guess again, I'm a little confused with talking about school districts and RADs, because my understanding is the RADs that we're looking at, if you look at one map that just came out, it's huge. It goes from Lowell all the way to St. Johnsbury, basically. It includes the whole Essex County. So I don't know how many towns you have, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's not a school district, that's a RAD within, this new district. So it's huge. It's not, just 4 towns that are in a school district now. It's 27 towns.
Yeah, and I think that's why we want to make sure that you could have multiple RADs within a school district. I mean, if you think of a RAD as just a reappraisal district, it's just a district, it's just an area that they're gonna reappraise under one contract. Or have one board hearing appeals. School district is a school district. That's gonna set that school budget. And the reason why we want to make sure we have the equalization study under the same school district and have everybody in that school, all the municipalities in the school district on the same cycle, is because there's going to be one tax rate for that school district. So there should be one CLA for that school district. And you are going to have towns that are going to, maybe increase in value faster than other towns. But you have that already. And we have that within a town. I can tell you in Colchester, we have that. So if we shrink the amount of years, which we have, 6 years, hopefully we're not going to see that huge swing in that 4-year period. Where one town's going to be, 50%, another town's going to be 80% within the same school district. But it's possible. I mean, and I think right now you have towns with 4 sales, or you have towns with 20 sales. That's not a large enough volume of sales to make a statistically accurate CLA. And when you have 20 sales in a town, you have one sale that's 50% and the rest of them are 80%. Now all of a sudden your CLA's dropped that 1 year for the 3 years that sale's in there. And then that sale's gone, that CLA shows back up, right? So to avoid that, the more larger area has a more stable CLA.
Well, you can do that now. I mean, if there's, not that many sales, they can go outside the town, but it's gonna be more locally looking at, not St. Johnsbury compared to. Anyway, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you both very much. I really appreciate all the time you've put into this. In addition to everything else you're doing. And yeah, really appreciate your attention to it. Thank you. Peter, I've heard rumor that your testimony was fairly brief on this topic. Is that true?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, that is what I said, so.
Great. Please join us.
Okay.
Thank you.
And quite honestly, probably not as technical as what you've heard or what you will hear.
That's perfectly fine. It's good to have a little.
That's me. Hi, Peter Tucker here for the Vermont Association of Realtors. Thank you, Chair, for inviting me and the committee to talk about this. We are supportive of this reappraisal process. We do property valuations every day. And one of the challenges is when you have an old appraisal, the gap, you can determine what the gap is and try and find market values for properties. But, the more current the appraisal is, the more accurate, we're going to be in pricing properties and trying to help sellers get the best value for their property. Regional assessment districts lining up with school district boundaries is something that seems to be the right approach. I know that would be more than the 1,000 units, RAD district, that was just proposed here. But the reality is that this is all coming out of that education reform bill, right? And as school districts are, and hopefully we get school district boundaries before long. The taxing capacity of that area is important. Think about school districts that would, vote to provide excess spending, for their particular school district. If they're in multiple different RADs, then, it's just going to create the confusion and challenges to get everybody to vote on the right thing. There was a little bit of discussion about, about market conditions between towns, and I think that is going to be one of the huge challenges here. You know, going from Jay to Lowell, you know, there are definitely different property values in both. I think at the same time that, you know, you look at any particular town and you're going to have better neighborhoods and different neighborhoods and different values. You know, in terms of
Can you
the,
speak to that for a minute?
Yeah.
So when we use the J to Lowell example, and I've not spent very much time, unfortunately, in J or Lowell, though I've been. I'm just aware of towns with like enormous variation, practically how I imagine the J to Lowell variation within that town.
sure, they're both smaller towns, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just
There is like that scale of variation within towns already in Vermont, right?
that's correct.
Okay, that's not my.
Yeah, and that, I guess that's what I'm really driving at is that, you know, there are different community areas within any town that have higher and lower values. You know, so it's going to be a huge challenge and to get on a 6-year cycle, I think just, you know, adds to the complexity of, you know, what this proposal does. You know, the other part that happens is the market continues. The day the reappraisal is done, the next day the market changes and continues to change. Goes up, goes down, but is always evolving. I think that, you know, hopefully we're in, you know, I don't know, maybe we enter a more stable period. COVID was a great example of where in a 2-year period, you know, I mean, I track real estate values and appreciation. And from 2008 and 9, the end of the financial crisis, to 2019, you know, there may have been like a 1% increase in value. You know, some towns a little bit more, particular properties more. But the reality is, you know, just very slow and steady. And then you looked at 20+% increases in 2020 and 2021, and then falling back, right? So the reality is that the market's going to continue forward. Getting on a 6-year cycle is going to cut out a lot of the, you know, the huge peaks and valleys. But you're still going to have peaks and valleys. You know, when we look at the legislation here, you know, it really does, it still puts a lot on towns. Towns need to maintain their grand list. Towns would do their own reappraisals or group together for reappraisals. You know, what we thought going into this regional assessment district was, you know, we're going to create these bigger districts that have some efficiencies in terms of reappraisal efforts. You know, you'd be combining a bunch of towns together, getting a big, you know, big reappraisal done, and have, you know, and have it cost per unit less. You know, so I think that, you know, giving the towns kind of the option to band together or not band together, you know, is that really the intent and the outcome? And will you get the efficiencies that, you know, we were kind of thinking were going to happen here? Let's see. Yeah. In terms of regional assessment district appeals, I know of one justice of the peace in a town who said, hey, this will be great. I won't have to do tax appeals, but they're still going to have to do municipal tax appeals. So there's still the chance that, you know, property gets appealed on value, but then has its, you know, some kind of a different approach with a municipality. You know, so it does seem like this 2-part system is being created to some extent, you know, with the RADS being the oversight, but the municipality still having some pretty significant responsibility to maintain their grand list and to do their appeals, and then to figure out how to group together to do a reappraisal. You know, we would encourage you to use Vermont-based appraisal companies whenever possible, not you, but I guess the towns themselves. You know, and
Why is that?
pardon me? Why?
I mean, I'd
Because
love to give it.
Vermont business.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was some other reason.
We need, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, just that, you know, really, I think that, you know, anything that we can do within our state boundaries, you know, I'll talk about hiring Vermont employees tomorrow. But you know, it just, you know, when it's possible, that would be great. And, you know, I was down in Senate Economic and Housing last week, and, you know, they were talking in their housing bill about requiring towns to do, you know, 20-year housing projections going forward. And, you know, they're all in the process of that somehow. But, you know, most town folks, you know, select board, planning commission, the listers are volunteers. And, you know, if depending on how the guidelines are set up, you know, in terms of doing reappraisals, you know, many of those volunteers may decide this is, you know, way more than I signed up for and decide not to, decide to resign their position. So, you know, always respectful of those town volunteers and concerned that, you know, if this is too big a load, that they won't, you know, they won't continue. And that's it.
Thank you.
Questions? Yeah,
Appreciate it.
that's pretty brief. Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take
Yeah.
care. See you
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay.
Jill, you want to join us? Wrap it all up with a bow?
My name is Jill Remick. I'm the Director of Property Evaluation and Review at the Tax Department. Thanks for the chance to talk through with you all the latest version. I tried to grab the 2.5 on my way out the door, but I just kind of wanted to sort of re-table set a little bit. It's been really hard to sort of continue to operate under the reality that we in the towns are in while we're talking through some of these larger theoretical pieces. And I'm worried we might be missing some steps in order to set this up for success. So I think as Peter just mentioned, there's a lot of work that happens between reappraisals and at the municipal level. And those things are definitely in need of greater support and resources. So I definitely would defer to my buddies, me and Robert from VALA, who are also on our stakeholder group, which we really appreciate. But what we're hearing in our tiny division of PVR is that towns are really struggling to find individuals to do the grantless maintenance work. So setting aside the reappraisal firm piece, which we definitely, even as of this morning, we were talking to firms about some of the logistical pieces of this. Towns are struggling to find folks to do this work. The reality is that a lot of municipalities rely on our very small team of, I think we're down to about 5 district advisors for a whole lot of work that happens between reappraisals. So I'm not saying all this to whine, but rather sort of the reality is unless we also sort of shore up and support some of this work happening between reappraisals, then we've sort of skipped over a big amount of work that needs to happen to set this up for success. Even talking with the firms, right, they're struggling to find folks to do this work for them, even under the 6-year cycle. They're like, we can find data collectors, which are the folks who are sort of going out and doing the field work. But because of the volume of work that's out there and being on the 6-year cycle, they're also sort of echoing what we've been saying about we really need some time to build up the field and the expertise in the field so that we have people who can do this work. We do not have that right now. We also have a few pieces that have gone into law over the last few years that we really see are bearing some fruit, and we would like to give them time to bear that fruit so we can then place any reappraisal plans on top of that. So for example, the 6-year cycle, we are getting there. Every year, more towns are reappraising, and we are now seeing contracts through 2030, 2031. So it's going to take a full cycle, at least one full cycle of the entire state getting onto the 6-year cycle. But then we could very much see sort of the fruits of that labor and see where there could be some ability to sort of build on top of that. The certification requirements that have passed recently, we're excited to do that because it is part of this sort of building capacity, but it also has scared a lot of people out of the field and has, it's not as easy as just saying you shall get certified. That requires us to build a new system to host the trainings. It all adds up to there's only a finite amount of time. So we also really would like the legislation to include the support for us to actually hire sort of an IAAO or Appraisal Institute or some firm to sort of analyze and provide us like recommendations for our reappraisal cycle. So the conversation earlier was a great example about like what makes a statistically significant grouping of parcels or appraisals. And we would love to have some time to like build up our and town's expertise on that. We also are, you know, if we do not address the sort of grand list maintenance between reappraisal cycles, we have towns on different CAMA vendors, and the towns are working within different CAMA systems. Some have zoning, some do not. Some have volunteer listers, some do not. Some have assessors, some do not. And the firms are saying, you know, if a town is not interested in switching over to our CAMA system, we really can't help them. And if they don't have zoning and we don't know when they last reappraised, or, you know, there has been a lull between reappraisals, that's a lot more work to do that reappraisal. So all this to say that, like, I think we are working in the right direction with this 6-year cycle. I think that's provided a huge amount of like sort of stability and like direction, and trying to sort of, you know, provide the supports for municipalities to work together. And we just need a little more time to sort of set these things up so that we can set ourselves up for success. So I'm just expressing a little concern / hope that we can continue to talk more about the other components about maintaining the education grant list, aside from just the reappraisal district piece. Because we can keep it at county, that's fine. We had our, I think we called them like government assessment entities in our report in 2023 that was closer to, I think it was like 6,000 parcels. The boundary of the RAD can be all sorts of different pieces, but if we haven't done what we can to sort of shore up the accuracy and consistency and support for that grant list work in between, then I think we've really missed an opportunity.
Bill, if we're missing language, either here or in sort of our budget recommendation letter about positions you need or contracting authority you need or grant list maintenance, just say the words and the language, will pop it in. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. I think Representative Maslin had something in them.
Yeah, along the same line, Joe, you said a bunch of things, all of which were useful, and of course, I didn't write them all down. If it wouldn't be problematic for you to make up a list of bullets, things that we should consider. I mean, you said what's statistically logical, you know, and I mean, there was a whole bunch of things there. It made perfectly good sense to me when I went across here, you know. Some of which I think Chair is correct. We may be able to incorporate some on reasonably short notice to make your job easier for everything comes out better, because I mean, those are the things I think that make a big difference at the end of the day when the governor signed the bill. You know, if we could put them in there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, so go ahead, Representative Kimball, and then let's.
Jill, to your point, in 2019, there was a law passed, creating regional assessment districts if municipalities wanted to form them. Just wondering, did any? What are the what if they did? Great. What are the results? If they didn't, why not?
No, none did the assessment district formation. I think it comes down to, right, this isn't like a new barrier. I think every room in this building is sort of wrestling with how do we share resources across municipal boundaries. And so I think what we found over our last couple of years, and sort of what we tried to articulate in our report, was this is a great way to work towards, but we've got to walk before we run. We've got to find ways to ensure that all municipalities, if that is still the place that the grant list maintenance is happening, municipal grant list is being maintained, and the CAMA decisions and the property tax billing and all the administrative pieces that come along with that, then it's sort of slowly starving to death. We've got to support them more. And if that means, right, that's sort of a path in the road. If we are deciding that we are going to continue to rely on the municipalities to maintain the grand list between reappraisals, we're going to continue to rely on them to do property tax billing. We're going to continue to rely on them for homestead declaration and current use and exemptions and all of those day-to-day pieces that have nothing to do with reappraisal but result in a complete grand list, then we've got to inject some support there, Because right now, like my team and the towns we're hearing from, everybody is feeling overwhelmed and wanting genuinely to meet these expectations for the certification and for the 6-year cycle. And I have to tell you, I think the classification piece is coming down the road is also causing a lot of anxiety. These are all pieces that require a human being at the other end to do the work. And I think there's sort of an assumption, not in this room necessarily, but in the building, that there's always plenty of people at the municipal level who are able to take this on, and that's not the case. So
I think part of the reason we're doing this is because there aren't necessarily the people at the municipal level to do this. And so again, like if there are changes you want made to the language to meet the concerns you're raising, we share them. And you know, we're waiting for sort of what the right financial resources are for municipalities, all of that. We really want to make this work. We've been working on it for a long time.
thank you.
Is it okay to wait for, because thank you. Appreciate it.
I mean, so I realize I'm not responding to like specific languages in the very latest bill, but you know, it just, we spend a lot of time on this. We really want to get this right. And I think the formation of some size of, I think like Robert pointed out, right? So if we're trying to sort of remove barriers and remove the barriers for towns working together so that they can do this work together more efficiently, then that is my goal. And throughout the stakeholder working group this summer that led to our report, municipalities want to be able to pitch in and help each other out. They want to be able to share these resources. And so I'd really like to also, maybe that's part of this piece of coming back here, but what are the boundaries that the barriers we can remove? There are like statutory, and I think Vermont League of Cities and Towns has flagged this over and over when we do talk about this. Like it's not easy for towns to share a contract right now. It is challenging for different towns to encumber other towns' funds over multiple years. So if that is something we can address, that is another huge hurdle, so that if Peacham and Barnet wanted to share a contract, or you know, U32 school district wanted, then there exists that structure. We don't have that right now. And I think you'll probably hear more about that from VLCT. Like if there are ways we can create that interlocal agreement to be more user-friendly or possible, right? Because that's, we sort of, in PBRs, we're trying to like support this and change this and make this happen. We just keep running up against this barrier that it's not as easy as it sounds for towns to jointly contract.
No, it's really hard.
It's really, and so I think then, you know, then you're sort of creating the opportunities here. And then when there are municipalities that are being sort of left out or are needing that support, then you've got a construct on which to like sort of pull them into the fold and add them in there. And I
What's the challenge? Sorry, you keep on going.
no, that's fine.
No, I've been like, no, continue.
Well,
I'm Representative Higley will say something and
I really want to point out, there are some really big things that have happened lately that are happening, right? So the 6-year cycle, like I mentioned, so we are getting there. We are up to 44 towns reappraising this year. That's the most I've seen in recent history. That is a step towards everyone being on a 6-year cycle, which creates more up-to-date grand lists, more clarity between the taxpayers and the municipalities of what property values are, so they're not going stale for 12, 15 years. It creates sustainability and consistency for reappraisal firms and to towns to know and to plan. I think as these folks pointed out too, there's a lot of costs that are really hard to articulate for a town to reappraise and to maintain things between there. We will get a better picture as we get further into the 6-year cycle. We also are hoping to, you know, the data standardization piece, there's a new, I think it was in our miscellaneous tax bill perhaps, but so basically to do a bigger CAMA extract to the grand list, because that will inform PVR, but more importantly, it will inform VCGI, the Vermont Center for Geographic Information. It'll form ACCD to help build that housing dashboard that the legislature has asked ACCD to maintain. So there are like, things are happening, things are in motion. We're working on instructions for towns about how to do this contiguous parcel now, and, you know, but those things all sort of take time. I do think, I don't want to come in here sounding like we're not interested in participating, or that we're like, if this isn't, we're actually, the building blocks are happening. It's just taking time to build them. And then I do think things like the contracting is like a barrier that could use some focus to address. Sorry, then my Jill ramble.
Not a ramble.
So yeah, and then just a reminder, again, not trying to complain to this particular committee, but the tax classifications alone are a lot. There's chips, there's all these, there's valuation freezes, all of these very good things that have passed recently around the building are sort of built on that presumption that we've got people there who can do that work. And instead, what we're seeing is we have fewer people in those buildings. We have, fewer capacity to do that work. And so the idea of then also on top of that, making massive changes without having any support, feels like we're setting ourselves up for failure. So it's not as exciting to talk about the grand list maintenance pieces between there, but I really think we need to make sure we don't leave that out of the conversation for RADs. I think like when we first were talking about the RADs, it was sort of like all of that work should be done in this sort of grouping, right? The grand list maintenance should be shared. The CAMA system should be the same. The valuation should happen on the same cycle under the same rules. And if we skip over that and we just put a RAD like boundary and we don't address the still having the assessment at the local level and still having different CAMA systems, then we, we're still having the grand list being maintained differently between reappraisals.
So are you recommending that we move the grand list? It's Representative Higley's turn to talk, not mine. Go for it, Mark. So sorry.
So, when I heard you mention, how some towns have zoning, some towns don't. They have different systems, they have different mapping. Talked about licensing of appraisers, maybe all that sort of stuff. Is that in your thoughts going down the road to have that all in line as far as everybody has zoning? Everybody uses the same camera system, everybody has the same mapping. I mean, definitely it'd be easier, but that's gonna be, unbelievable request for many towns that I know. Right? I hear you mention that, and I'm just wondering if that's layered on top of everything else that we're talking about.
I think I'm kind of doing the opposite, which is being, as we said, the tax department, the skunk at the garden party, where it's hard to live in a world of imagining a RAD when we have not, then when we don't have the support needed at the municipal level to still do the work at the municipal level. So it would, like I said, the 6-year reappraisal is working. We would love to sort of beef up our reappraisal standards. The firms are trying to step up. The towns are obviously coming to the table and participating in this conversation. We're revisiting the per parcel payment, which is exactly one of the places I think we can address this. So I'm actually sort of going the opposite, where I would like to sort of like build and structure and support towns to do as much as they can voluntarily. And then if there are pockets or there are places that it makes sense to sort of say, okay, you guys work together, by that point, we'll be equipped to do that. But right now, by just saying RADs are this, you're doing this, you have to contract together, but we don't, who's the contract, who's holding the contract, who's doing all the work between reappraisals. It's a little sort of more of the long game, but I'm not advocating towards us moving to a statewide CAM or anything like that, because it feels like we sort of have gone that crossroads. If the crossroads is we want to continue to have municipalities maintain their own grand list, then we've got to support that and we've got to build the structure to like set them up for success. And if we just skip over that and go to reappraisals every 6 years, but we haven't addressed the work in between, I think we're going to continue to lose listers and assessors. I think we're going to continue to have a hard time finding people to do the work. And we sort of lost that opportunity.
Thank you.
Jill, you said something about being the skunk at the garden party. I kind of thought we were at the same garden party, and I brought some tea and you brought some cakes, and we like had a menu that was the report you gave us that we are now working from.
Yeah.
And so I'm just totally confused about what comes next.
So I think it was kind of buried in our report that we said, we're not ready for this yet. We've got to do these less exciting things to set us up for success for
Yes.
RADs.
And so the date is pretty far out and would like to build in, because this all takes like, as you said, is like on basically a 20-year cycle.
Mhm.
And the legislature has a short memory such a short memory, 2 years, if we're lucky, mostly, sometimes a day. The more we can build in sort of a roadmap for future legislatures to actually be following in partnership with you, the better able we are to actually ever get where we're going. And so all of that preliminary work that you're describing, if there's parts of it that are not in the legislation, like please say the word and we can put it in and we can bump out timelines. But without it all being laid out there, I don't know how we're ever going to get anywhere because this is fairly tedious for all of us, right? And so, like now is the time that people are interested in the tedious work. And I think in the future, no one's going to be interested in it unless we like really lay out the groundwork now.
Fair. And I think, thank you. And I agree. I know it's been really hard to sort of watch this over.
And I wish I could like quadruple everyone's capacity because I know that your team is stretched like it's crazy good work and stretched really thin.
I mean, I admit that's part of why I'm feeling the way that I am is
Yeah.
I'm representing what I'm hearing from towns and from my team that like we have to have a chance to do the things we've been asked to do correctly. So I do appreciate it, right? Like this is a future state. This is not a 2027 state. But I do think the grand list per parcel payment, I think, I don't know that anybody disagrees that the $850 per parcel for reappraisal and grand list maintenance that was set quite a while ago, even just by inflation, that is not keeping up. And so I think it's great that we're separating. I think it's great that this is separating the reappraisal from the grand list maintenance. It would be great to have like a per parcel number. If anything, as I was sitting over there, I'm like, well, we could sort of delineate from what was the reappraisal and grand list maintenance. But I think if we sort of did the inflation, I think $850 is probably not that far off
For just maintenance.
for just the grand list maintenance
I
piece.
had a feeling that that was true.
We'll just, that's close enough. Because I think different municipalities probably need different support too. I do think another piece that Mimi raised that we also talked about this summer at the stakeholder group is there is a lot of back and forth between the tax department and municipalities, a lot of administrivia work that does not necessarily help the municipal grand list. So like current use, equalization study, homestead, those are actually like the majority of a lot of the work that they're doing. So that is another piece that we would love to like have that time to do in the meantime, right? And this doesn't require any statutory change, but we are hoping to sort of break out each of those processes and see where we can have them go back and forth fewer times and have less work on the municipality because it is for the education and grand list and it is for statewide education and property tax system. And so we also will, it is not necessarily PBR's like role to try to build up a workforce, but we're here and we want to try and we've started those conversations. So I do think we are going to continue in earnest to work with CCV and the Labor Department. And I'm forgetting someone, which I'm, thank you, Secretary Thomas. Because that's like clearly a need. The firms have expressed that. The towns would love to have folks that they can hire or contract with to do this work.
I'd love to do the work. To be clear. I think there are lots of people who would love to do it.
So that, and I think, again, that's like, it's going to take a little time, but if there are people out there looking for work and there are people who are looking for people to do the work, then let's like connect them. And it was really exciting to talk to Labor and CCV because I do feel like there are some short-term certification programs that can help build up that workforce. So all this to just say, we are working towards and want to support work and we see the future state of us all being on a 6-year cycle and having the more time that goes by there, then the more like CAMA systems can get set up or changed, or municipalities could maybe contract together so that we can work towards a future state where we are able to do this. But until we address that town to town contracting piece, I think that's always going to be like this barrier to, that's always been what we've run up against. Like, it's like, okay, but literally how?
I think that's why we were thinking of having you do all the contracts thing, despite many, many years. And in my professional non-legislative experience, collaborating actually costs money and time. And if you need to collaborate because you don't have money and time, it's really, really, really hard to step outside of your role to spend the money and time to collaborate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably just said the same thing with our totally different
Totally
life
different
words.
perspectives,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank
No,
you.
it's fine.
I think, like I said, I think the pieces about the per parcel payment, we're really excited to see that. That's been a long time challenge, right? If we keep sort of saying we don't have the capacity, well, let's find some capacity there. And having the reappraisal payments come out in some more standardized fashion, like the $66 per parcel or every 6 years. That also helps us come back to you in the future and say, we know exactly how much it costs to reappraise this many towns every year, but we don't necessarily have that level of specificity. But thank you for listening and thank you for all your work on this. And we'll continue to be here and answer any
Do
questions.
you need any legislative authority with CCV or the Department of Labor or to do a sunrise study with the Secretary of State about licensure or anything like that?
My understanding is not the first two. I didn't get the sense that we needed a legislative ask for the Sunrise report, but I feel like I heard testimony in some committee that maybe that is
I said something.
full.
So, okay.
I can reach out to Secretary of State and ask them if they need that.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much, Jill. Folks, we are gonna come back here after the floor to do a quick walkthrough and vote of 578. That is the one about animal cruelty. I am going to encourage everyone to take some time to read it between now and when you go to the floor. And also encourage you to focus on the very, very, very narrow jurisdiction we have over this bill, please. And so we're gonna be back here like really immediately after the floor. And
Great.
try to vote that out. Thank you.
Oh, we'll do yes or no.
That's it? Yeah, I've heard no rumor of amendment needs. No, I mean, for all I know, we're gonna find something